Hi, my name is Maccabee Avishur of Yeshiva University. Today we'll be talking about preparing a great model lesson. Some of the things you'll see in here can be used in developing any lesson, but the focus here is on model lessons. It's always a good idea to take notes during this presentation, by the way. Before the model lesson, the most important thing for you to do is to get in touch with the principal or the school leader with whom you've been in touch before being invited in. And you'll want to ask that person a few things. Number one, ask if it's okay to be in touch with the current teacher and who the current teacher is. Then you should get in touch with that current teacher and ask a few important things. Number one, have that teacher tell you about the kids in the class. Ask what they're learning and ask what that teacher perceives to be successful teaching. What does it look like when good teaching is going on? Keep in mind that this teacher's point of view is important, and also that it's one point of view in the school. It'll give you a snapshot of what it's like to be in the classroom. It can also be really helpful to ask some of those questions to the principal or the school leader, especially the ones about what kids are like in the school and what successful teaching looks like at the school. You want to ask that school leader about the school's philosophy. What's the school about? What is it looking for? And especially, what is an effective teaching style in that school? Of course, you'll want to ask about logistics. You'll want to ask about what class you're teaching, when you're teaching that class, the number of students in the class. You'll want to know who else is going to be in the room when you're teaching. You'll also want to know what subject matter you should be teaching, what kind of lesson, and how long the lesson will be. Will you be teaching for a full period or only for part of the period? It also can be really helpful to ask for an advance observation, in which you'll come in at a different time to see the class that you'll be teaching. You can do this on the same day that you'll be teaching to see the same kids, or on a previous day. School leaders typically like that kind of behavior. Something else that's really important is to make a lesson plan. Now this sounds obvious because one of the major elements of teaching, of course, is developing a lesson plan, but some people do a better job of this than others, and those who do a better job have a higher likelihood of landing the job they want. So the first step here, of course, is to have one. Have a lesson plan. And when we ask school leaders what they want to see in a model lesson and in a lesson plan, one of the most common answers, which sounds obvious but might not be, is that they want to see a lesson that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. The template we're going to share with you shortly helps you develop that. So here's a model of a template which we can send to you if you would like. It's 2 pages and we're going to go through page by page. The first page, of course, has all of the regular stuff, the name of the lesson, the grade level, the duration, and the subject, and who prepared it. Now you might ask, what do I need to put all of this on my own lesson plan? And the answer is because you'll be sharing it. You should share this document, preferably in a PDF format, with the school leaders before you get there, so that they can look at it and you can even ask for feedback on it before you teach. That really starts a good relationship. Then comes the overview section, the purpose, rationale. That section is really the answer to the question that students are all thinking in their heads and sometimes asking out loud. Why do I have to learn this? If you can answer that question effectively, your lesson has a much greater chance for succeeding. The next 2 sections, the big ideas and the essential questions, are really helpful for those who have some training in backwards design. If you don't have training in that, then this might be a difficult section for you, and I would actually recommend avoiding it. If you do have training in it, spend some time coming up with some big ideas and essential questions because they're really important to the lesson. The last section on this page is the objectives. Probably some of the most important stuff that you'll come up with and some of the most important stuff that school leaders will focus on when reviewing your lesson. These objectives describe what the students are going to know and do at the end of your lesson. And it's really important to use words that are verbs that are measurable. Things like retell, compare, etc. I try to counsel people to stay away from words like understand or know because you can't really measure those things. If you want to know some other great verbs, look up Bloom's taxonomy on Google to find some of those great examples. The second page of this has your actual plan. And if you type into a table like this, of course, you know that the box expands, and this should take up several pages, not just one. It's always good to start your beginning, as the school leaders mentioned, with an introduction or what we call an anticipatory set. something to hook the kids in, get them interested, and explain to them why they'll be learning this and why it will be valuable to them. Then it's important to list for yourself, and even to tell the students, I guess, the information and skills that will be covered in this lesson. Then the activities portion. You want to make sure that the learning activities are things that are going to help the students learn the information and skills that you've laid out in the previous box. What I always like to ask myself is, what are students doing at this portion of the lesson? If my answer to that question is listening to me, and that portion lasts for longer than 60 seconds, I know I'm in trouble. Students have to be actively doing something at most points in the lesson in order for the learning to really be effective. That doesn't mean they have to be climbing the walls or playing a game, but they have to be doing something, and you shouldn't expect that they know what to do. If you want students to take notes, you need to instruct them on what kind of stuff to write down in their notes. Then, of course, you want to include stuff for checking for understanding, or what's called verification, to know that they've learned what you think that they're supposed to be learning. There should be some kind of assessment or closure to make sure that you've gotten to the end of your lesson, and then you'll list for yourself the materials you'll need to bring with you. On the day of the lesson, things you should have and things you should do. Of course, bring in your visual aids. It's really important, and school leaders confirm this, that you have something visual for students to look at during the lesson. This could be something you project on the board, or it even could be a handout, or pictures you bring in, or some kind of prop, but it's important to have something visual. This is true of every class you teach, not just your model lesson. Something really else important is to plan how you're going to use the board. The board is there as a tool for you, and if you include in your lesson plan how you're going to use it, what you're going to write on there, how students might use it, that will be helpful to you. I want to say a small note about technology. Many schools that we give model lessons in currently have smart boards and other kinds of technology. Unless you have previously arranged with the school exactly how you're going to use technology and have a chance to test it, I would highly recommend not using technology or relying on using it, because you know and I know that something always goes wrong, and that can really torpedo your lesson, and you don't want that to happen. So it's in some ways best to keep your lesson analog as opposed to digital, unless you have good experience with the technology that's being used directly in that specific classroom. Prepare a lot of questions that you want kids to answer. You can use questions as drivers for the lesson, because kids love to figure out puzzles. And plan those questions. It's okay to come up with spontaneous ones as well, but actually write down some great questions in your lesson plan. That can be really helpful. It's also important, of course, with those questions and other things, to vary the different types of activities and modalities that kids are going to be engaging in. Don't do the same thing for the entire lesson. Finally, it's important to practice. This might sound lame, but it's important to get up in front of your friends, maybe in front of your parents, or any group that will let you, and practice your lesson with them from start to finish, and have them give you feedback on it. Don't let your model lesson be the first time that you're giving that lesson. When you come to the school, of course you have to dress professionally. Men should be in a suit, women should be dressed modestly and comporting with the school's dress code, and should be dressed nicely as well. Now, sometimes people think it's great to come dressed in something that will help them be remembered. They might come in a very bright shirt, or crazy tie, or funny kippah, or something else. Maybe a sweater that stands out instead of a suit. I highly, highly recommend against that. It just makes you look like you're not a rule follower, which is not what schools are interested in. Secondly, arrive early if you can. I'm not saying to arrive 7 hours early for your 1 p.m. model lesson, but come well enough in advance that you'll have time to settle in, walk around the school, and meet different people. Also, it's important, bring your own handouts with you. Don't come to the school and ask them to do all your printing for you. It doesn't get you off on the right foot, and it's well worth the few dollars you'll spend at Kinko's. Actually teaching the lesson. Smile while you're teaching. Don't be creepy about it, but also don't be too stoic. Don't forget there will be school leaders in the room, so behavior will probably be pretty good, so you can actually be friendly. School leaders want to see that you're going to connect with their students. Don't forget to introduce yourself and tell people what you want to be called. Most schools have their teachers being called by a Mr., Mrs., or Rabbi, etc., or doctor, and their last name. If you're teaching in a school that goes by first name, make sure to find that out first. And if you're not comfortable with that, speak to the school leader about that before your lesson. Also find out the kids' names. Have some mechanism for you knowing their names during the class. Maybe make a name tent or something for each of them, or have them make them, and use those names throughout the lesson. Kids love to hear their names, and it shows the school leaders that you actually care about their students. Finally, be positive. This looks like a lot of different things. Give students positive feedback when they're doing things right and doing what you want. Even if they're just following a rule, use that positive behavior support to help them continue to behave in the way that you want. Secondly, interact with the kids. Be positive. And always speak in a respectful tone with them. I know that sometimes people think it's okay to be sarcastic in middle school and high school settings especially. I actually think that's a big mistake, especially in a model lesson. School leaders are typically turned off by sarcasm, even if you think the kids are reacting nicely to you. Now, something else to keep in mind is to be confident in your model lesson. Even if you're not Cary Grant, the world's greatest movie star, it's important to be confident. You don't have to be super outgoing and like the rah-rah cheerleader, but you have to stand in front of the class and not be meek. That's very important. Again, that's why practice that we mentioned earlier is important to this process. Additionally, it's really important that you speak loudly, clearly, and slowly. Practice speaking slowly because you'll be nervous on the day of the model lesson, and when we're nervous, we tend to speak fast. Move around the room. Don't do what this teacher is doing and stand in front of the board pointing at it as if that's the most important thing in the world. The students are important. Get close to them. Move around. Don't make the mistake of pacing like a lion in front of the board or your desk. That can be really off-putting. Finally, listen. Those questions we mentioned earlier, when you ask them of the students, listen to what they're saying. A great trick for this is after a student has finished answering your question, wait for the count of 1 second in your head. It goes like this. Student says, I think blah, 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 blah. That's really interesting. Thanks for sharing. That 1 second in between allows the student to recognize that you've actually heard him and you weren't just waiting to speak. Additionally, I find it really off-putting when teachers simply repeat the answers that students gave them as if the student didn't put it quite correctly and I'd like to say it in a better way. That's not helpful and it won't get you a callback. Listen to what the students are saying and let their own words stand for themselves. You can of course ask for clarification, but don't repeat what they're saying. After the model lesson can be very important. Oftentimes the school leader will sit down with you to talk about it. It's important to reflect. I love this MC Escher picture where he sees himself in a slightly distorted view. And guess what? You do too. So when you're reflecting with the school leader, think about something positive you did and something that you'd like to work on. But also, listen to his feedback and show him that you want to grow. Finally, show him that you care about his students. Maybe mention specific things that you observed in the class. We hope that was helpful to you. If you are not yet on Judge Jobs, please sign up for a free account and utilize it to help you in your career. If you have any questions, please be in touch with our office, and good luck.